What's up, guys? So I'll pose a question to you to start this video off, which is, what do you think makes or will make jiu-jitsu matches more exciting? Right? Many of you guys might have opinions on that. But we just finished up the Jiu-Jitsu Open here in Frankenmuth, Michigan, which ended up being one of our biggest tournaments of the year. I'm getting ready to go do the seminar that we do the day after the competition and do that. But, you know, I noticed something recently, and by the way, I don't have the answers as far as how to make it more exciting, but I just wanted to sort of have a chat with you guys and just sort of chew on some ideas together. Because it's like the big question for all people running competitions, right? Like, we want to run competitions, but everybody's interested in how do you make this thing more exciting, right? And some people will sort of talk about making it exciting to the like non-jiu-jitsu practitioner, which I think is like, maybe that's something to worry about down the road, but I think for right now it's not even important. You know, that's an audience that I don't think should be focused on as much as the audience who actually trains jiu-jitsu, who do not actually watch competitions, because I think that's probably the easiest people to get buy-in on a competition, right? And there's lots of different formats, and many of them have pros and cons, right? But one of the things that I've noticed recently is when we do these Jiu-Jitsu Open competitions, we've consistently held about a 65 to 75% submission rate throughout the tournament. Sometimes a little less, sometimes more, but that's about where we're sitting at. And as the tournament grows, you know, that might change. It might lower a bit, but still 3 out of 4 matches on average finishing with a submission, which is pretty crazy. And, you know, even watching the matches, right? Like I was watching some of the black belts and brown belts and experts go yesterday, and, you know, where a lot of times you'll see a lot of gaming of the rules and stalling and stuff like that, like tactical stalling, right? I didn't see much at all, right? And then I was thinking about this at the Chicago tournament a couple weeks ago. So at the Chicago competition we had, the same weekend there was a big tournament going on, big prestigious tournament from another organization. I won't say their name, but they do point-based competitions. And again, I think the organization does a good job with what they do. What was interesting to watch, and I saw this in several matches because I was kind of flipping through them and catching up with some of my friends' matches and just looking through different matches, right? One of the interesting things was watching that as soon as like you have 0-0 and then all of a sudden someone gets a point, right? The demeanor of the person, the body language, the pacing of the person who just scored changes. You know, like I watched several matches where someone got an advantage or they got like a 2-point lead or whatever, and then afterwards they really just didn't engage much, right? Like they didn't engage, and, you know, maybe they got a stalling call or two or whatever, and then they end up basically, you know, for better or worse, just sort of messing around and doing enough not to get called and, you know, stalled too much, but essentially just stalled for the rest of the match and won, right? You know, and I don't know anyone who likes watching that, right? Who says, man, you know what I love watching? I love watching a guy get a takedown and then do nothing for the match. Now, there does seem to be a lot of different rule sets that seem to be going in different ways. I mean, you obviously have the not EBI, but the CJI, which had the ramp, the pit. And I think that ramp system, because you no longer have out of bounds, you don't have the potential for out of bounds. I think that's a great idea. I don't know if you can do that at scale for everywhere. I don't know if you can have your, like, you know, local competition scene having a pit somewhere, but it's a great idea, and I think that made a big difference. I think if you would have had CJI, I keep wanting to say CGI, the CJI, I think if you would have had that at a flat mat, I don't think it would have been nearly as exciting, but that ramp, I think that did it, you know? So I think that's a good idea. But, you know, even with the flat mat, I mean, there's still a lot of really good tournaments out there. You know, I mean, there's some good tournaments, like my buddy Brandon runs the PGF. I think the PGF's really exciting. I still like having some sort of win-loss at the end of the match. I don't necessarily like the draws, because I think sometimes people can still be a little passive. I think that was the rub with Metamoris years ago. If you guys are been around long enough to know about Metamoris was a organization, and they were kind of like the first one that was trying to do this big spectacle show of jiu-jitsu, probably a little ahead of their time. But one of the rubs was that, like, it was a 20-minute sub-only match, and there was a draw at the end. You can't have a draw. You know, if you think about, like, fighting is in jiu-jitsu matches, it's about having this little conflict between these two people, right? And then at the end of it, you want to have a resolution. You want to have like a nice ending. You want to have like a conclusion to it. I think sometimes when you have draws, it ends up making it like a really bad ending, where you're just kind of like left hanging, like, well, you know, like a cliffhanger, right? It's like when you're watching the Netflix show, and they always do that at the end of the show, where at the end of it, it's like, No. Then you got to watch the next episode to see what happens, right? So I think that was one of the rubs of the Metamorphosis, where it wasn't really exciting to watch because guys could just stall up, and as long as they didn't get submitted, well, hey, like, have me back next time. I'll do better then, and we could have went for it now, but we'll go for it next time. But then you always see guys like a Gary Tonin, for example. It doesn't matter what organization you put him in. He's a gamer. He's going to be aggressive, and he's going to go for a submission, right? So, it's a mentality thing, but there's a rules thing to it. One of the things that I've noticed is with our rule set, we do a sub only, but we do have a ref's decision at the end. And it's based on some basic criteria, legitimate submission attempts, technical aggression, and, dominant position control, meaning like back mount, side control, how long are you there, that kind of thing. And, we're still tweaking the rule system and the ref's decision and trying to improve it, right? It's not perfect, but we're trying to make it better. But I think there's something to that. I think there's something to, like, not knowing necessarily where you're at in the judge's eyes. Like, you think about MMA, you think about how hard guys have to fight. And I fought MMA, and I remember, like, there was always this, even if you were winning the fight, or it looked like you were winning the fight in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't know, like, maybe I need to do a little extra work. I need to do a little bit more. I need to push the pace a little bit. And I think part of that, not having that, like, point up there, like I said, I think it makes it more exciting to watch. And I'm just saying, from the casual jiu-jitsu practitioners, because even me just walking around, I could sit and watch matches like at our tournaments all day because they're exciting. Their people are just going. Like, they're not really holding back. There's no incentive to hold back. Everything's about going for it. Now, I know this kind of goes in the face of, say, the old traditional way of doing jiu-jitsu competitions, which was to incentivize everything from a fight standpoint. So if you think about jiu-jitsu scoring, it was all about getting on top to dominant position, mounts worth 4 points, back mounts worth 4 points, big points, right? Passing guard is worth 3 points. It was always about getting to these dominant positions, because if it was a fight, that would be the best route for safety and for dominating the person in a fight and being in control, right? That's the whole thing. But I think as jiu-jitsu grows, a lot of us like watching people engage in jiu-jitsu, and not necessarily just in the way of, like, getting on top, where we reward wrestlers for getting on top of people and stalling. And again, I like takedowns. I like wrestling. I love it. But I also love people pressing forward. So, like, when you take the person down, I want to see you pass the guard. I want to see you go for stuff. I don't want to see you just take someone down and then sit there and do nothing. That's not really what I think about in jiu-jitsu. And when we train jiu-jitsu, and when we think of jiu-jitsu, getting one takedown, stalling out for the rest of the match is not really what we think about, right? We think about people engaging in passes and sweeps and submissions and all this other stuff. And so I think having that, where you have a system in place where, again, you're incentivizing the submission, you're incentivizing people to go for it, but you're taking away that little, I've won something or lost something. Because here's what I mean. When you think about when you go into the actual match, if you go into a match and you're both 0-0, neither of you have won anything, right? You're both equal, right? But the minute one of you guys has a point, 1-0, 2-0, whatever it is, as soon as you are ahead, it's now your match to lose, right? Many of you guys have experienced that, right? Where you get in there and you experience this thing where you're, I'm winning now, and then you don't want to lose, and so you start to play a bit more passive, and you don't want to go for it, because if you go for it and you get swept, well, you might lose points. In a situation like ours, we don't actually penalize you for going for stuff. I mean, obviously if you get swept over, then that's going to look good for your partner, your opponent. But like, let's say if you're going for a submission and you drop back on something, it's not going to look bad for you. What we're looking for is who's pressing the action, who's going for techniques, who's actually doing the jiu-jitsu that we all want to see, right? And I was thinking about this earlier. I was talking to a guy, Nick, who ended up winning our expert division. He trains, I think, at Adamus, and we were talking. And he was telling me, and I don't know this to be true, but it sounds like it would be right, because I know that in most cases, the majority of matches are won by the person who scores first. It's like, I talk about this sometimes with my student, like, you want to draw first blood, right? You want to be the person that gets the first points, because, like, I remember seeing a stat for, like, one of the world's matches. It was like 70% of matches were won by the person who scored first, because they're now in the driver's seat, right? And a lot of times they'll begin to play more passive, and you have less opportunities. When people do not open up and go for stuff, if you're close to the same skill level, it's very hard to do things to people when they don't open up. Like, you can take a black belt versus black belt, and if you get one black belt just shelling up, it it's really tough to submit people. Going back to the Metamorphs matches, watch some of those. You'd see guys where if they didn't engage, I mean, good luck trying to submit a really good black belt or a really good competitor who doesn't want to engage. But when both people are engaging, anytime you go for something, you create space, you create vulnerabilities, and so you create opportunities for yourself and for other people. And so he was telling me that at the ADCC this past year, like 100% of the matches were won by whoever scored first. And again, it doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but one of the things that you would see this weekend is I saw lots of come from behind matches because there's not such a discouragement. If you're getting beat, you're getting beat, but you still feel like you're in the game because you're not looking up at the clock going, oh, it's 2-4 or it's 2-0, it's 4-0. I don't have a chance now. You're like, no, because I'm still in this, right? Even if you're getting destroyed, I saw several matches where even though dudes were getting like mopped up, and if they would have went to a ref's decision, soon they would have lost, but then they came back with a submission win, and it was a lot of fun to watch. And I even talked to a couple of them and the same thing. They were like, I just didn't feel discouraged because, there wasn't the point thing up there. So this isn't to necessarily bash point-based competitions because I like them. And I like when I compete in point-based competitions, like not all of my matches are the best, as far as like when I say the best, I mean exciting to watch. Like I try to do my best because I think of jiu-jitsu as an art form, and the way that I express my art is on the mats. Like an artist, he might have some canvas and paint, he might have sculptures, and he or she does the best that they can to put together the best representation of their skill. And so when I compete, like my thought is my brush strokes, that's my movement on the mat, right? And I want to express my best abilities on the mats. And so when I compete, I try to do my best to go for it, even if I get beat in the process, kill or be killed, right? I still try to play the rules as best I can, but I like to go for it. That said, they're not all pretty. That happens sometimes. But again, I like point-based competitions, but I do think there's something about not having points actually during the match and making it exciting. It's one of the things that's been interesting as a co-run a jiu-jitsu competition promotion, being able to see people get after it and create an environment where everybody seems to enjoy it, right? That's one of the things, like if any of you guys come to the Jiu-Jitsu Opens, tons of people are just coming up to me like, this is so much fun, this is an exciting competition, it's a lot of fun, the energy's good, and we're starting to get like this little crew of people that are coming to all the competitions and doing them, in the process, some of them are winning money, like we had one girl, she won we'll have to figure stuff out. She didn't win $700 yesterday in the she won 2 different absolute divisions, and then we had several other people winning $350 in the absolute divisions. Even white belts. I had a white belt who trained for a year. He's under a year. Like he's just a good white belt. He won the absolute and the beginners and took home $350 plus some other stuff. It's really cool. So anyway, I've had a lot of fun running it. But one of the questions that pops up to me is like, why are jiu-jitsu matches so boring sometimes for people, right? And then how do you make them more exciting? And I think one of the ways you make it more exciting is you take away that scoreboard so that people don't play passively, and you try to make everything incentivized to make them go, and at the same time you put a win and a loss at the end of it. Like you're going to win, you're going to lose, you better go for something. But again, you leave a little bit of ambiguity there for the judges to decide. So this way, there's always a bit of uncertainty. And, with that, sometimes you'll get judges where the judges' calls sometimes aren't I would say most of our judges' calls are good, but sometimes, some people are upset about them, which just happens. We all have blind spots. We see what our people do. We see what the people we care about, what they do best, and we sometimes miss what other people are doing. But all in all, I think it's been good, and we'll continue to tweak it, make it better. But what do you guys think? What do you think that you could do to, if you were an organizer of jiu-jitsu competitions, if you were running a competition, what do you think you do to make jiu-jitsu matches more exciting? The one last thing I forgot to throw in was like the time limits. I was talking to another guy, and he was talking about why we made the matches so short. And I was like, well, because I want people to go for it. If you look at like an ADCC matches, love the ADCC, it's great. Matches are too long. You look at every match, and every competitor goes into a match having to pace themselves for the potential full duration of the match. They just know this in the back of their head, right? You don't want it to go that long, but sometimes it will. And if you got a 15, 20-minute match, it's gonna be awful, right? It's gonna be a long match, and you don't want to come up short, so you pace for that, which turns into a lot of times a very boring match. Whereas you look at the ADCC trials, 6 minutes. everybody's going, because everybody has a gas tank for 6 minutes. And so we don't make our matches excessively long, and our absolutes are all about 5 minutes. And, basically anybody can go for 5 minutes. Now we have some longer matches in the expert divisions and stuff like that. But to me, it's like you look at high school wrestling to Olympic wrestling. They don't go, hey, in high school wrestling, you get 6 minutes. Okay, Olympic wrestling, you need to do 24 minutes or 25 minutes. No, they just say, go faster. Right, do more in the same time, the time that you have, the same duration. Just go more, And I think sometimes that's a better policy than extending it out and people saying that, oh, you need more time to get your jiu-jitsu going. I don't think so. I think that you just need to get going, and you just need to open up and stop being passive. And two people engaging, I think if they go really hard, you only have so much of that in you, and so making the matches shorter, I think, is also a good thing. So anyway, just some ideas to chew on. I'm chewing on them as I'm going through all this stuff kind of at the end of the weekend. So not necessarily the most snappy, hey, here's an idea for you video, but just chewing on some ideas with you guys. Feel free to throw your comments down below about making jiu-jitsu exciting. And that'll be that. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. And if you guys want any information about our Jiu-Jitsu Open competitions, you're welcome to check the links down below. And for all of you guys that came out here to Frankenmuth this weekend, I appreciate the hell out of you guys. This was one of our biggest competitions of the year. I think it ran great. It was a great energy in the room. You guys brought it. Again, there was a couple of different little tweaks and stuff that we'll be making to the competition after this one. Talk to some of you guys, but generally the information I got from you all was positive, and I just had a great time with you all, and hope you did too. And I'll talk to you guys soon.